A white billionaire handed her credit card with a $50,000 limit to a homeless black single father. 24 hours, no conditions, no strings attached. She walked away convinced she already knew what desperation would reveal about human nature. Hours later, the first transaction lit up her phone screen. She froze. No luxury items, no indulgence, not a single purchase for himself. What this man did in the next 24 hours shattered every belief she held about people and ripped open a wound she had buried for 15 years. What could make a billionaire weep? Evelyn Carter had not slept in 36 hours. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. At 45, she had built a software empire worth billions, graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, and commanded boardrooms with a single glance. Yet tonight, none of it mattered. Tonight marked 15 years. 15 years since she had met Daniel. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and let the memory wash over her. Back then, she had been a young entrepreneur with fire in her veins, and savings she had scraped together through years of relentless work. Daniel had walked into her life like a storm, charming and broken, drowning in debt from a failed business venture. She had believed in him when no one else would. She had poured her money, her time, her entire heart into helping him rebuild. "You're the only one who sees me," he had whispered to her one night, holding her close. "With you, I have everything." 5 years later, she had stood in a lawyer's office watching him sign papers that would strip away half of what they had built together. He had sat beside another woman, a younger woman, and he had not even looked at Evelyn. Not once. He had taken her trust, her love, her belief in human goodness, and he had crushed it all beneath his polished shoes. Since that day, Evelyn had lived by one truth: give anyone power or money, and they will show you who they really are. Always selfish. Always. She had tested this theory countless times over the years. She had watched employees embezzle funds when given financial authority. She had seen friends disappear when her usefulness expired. Every test confirmed what she already knew. People were predictable in their greed. The morning light began to creep across the sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. Evelyn had a board meeting in 3 hours, but she could not bring herself to prepare. Instead, she grabbed her coat and stepped into the elevator, descending from her glass tower into the streets below. She did not know where she was going. Her feet carried her through the awakening city, past coffee shops and newspaper stands, until she found herself descending the stairs into a subway station. The underground air hit her face, thick with the smell of metal and humanity. That was when she saw them. A man sat huddled against the concrete wall near the far end of the platform. His skin was dark, his clothes worn thin, his frame hunched protectively around something in his arms. As Evelyn drew closer, she realized it was a child, a little girl, no more than 6 years old, sleeping against his chest. The only jacket the man possessed was wrapped tightly around the child's small body. He wore nothing but a threadbare sweater, his breath visible in the cold air. He did not hold a sign. He did not extend his hand for spare change. He simply sat there, silent, his eyes fixed on the little girl's face, as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. Evelyn meant to walk past. She had seen homeless people before. She donated to charities, wrote checks, attended galas for good causes. That was enough. That was more than enough. But then the little girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at her father with an expression far too wise for her years. "Daddy, are you cold?" The man smiled, and something in that smile made Evelyn's chest tighten. It was not a smile of pretense or performance. It was genuine, warm, full of a love so pure it seemed to radiate heat into the frigid air. "I'm warm, baby girl. Having you is all the warmth I need. Evelyn stopped walking. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Those words. She had heard those words before. Different voice, different time, same lie. Daniel had said something so similar once, and she had believed him. She had believed every word. But this man was not Daniel. This man had nothing. No empire to build, no fortune to chase, no reason to manipulate anyone. He was just a father holding his daughter in a subway station, giving her his only source of warmth, without a second thought. A question formed in Evelyn's mind, sharp and sudden. What would he do if he had power? If he had money? Would he reveal the same selfishness that lived in everyone? Or would he be different? She knew the answer. She had always known the answer. Yet standing there, watching this stranger press a kiss to his daughter's forehead, she felt something she had not felt in 15 years. Doubt. Before she could talk herself out of it, Evelyn walked toward them. The man looked up, his eyes wary but not hostile. He shifted slightly, shielding his daughter from this unknown woman in expensive clothes. "I have a proposition for you," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the chaos churning inside her. The man said nothing. He simply watched her, waiting. Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out a credit card. It was sleek, black, the kind that most people never saw in their lifetimes. She held it out to him. "This card has a limit of $50,000. You can use it for the next 24 hours to buy anything you want. No conditions. No need to pay it back. After 24 hours, the card will automatically deactivate." The man stared at the card, then at her, then back at the card. His expression shifted from confusion to suspicion to something that looked almost like offense. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested." "It's not a game," Evelyn replied. "Think of it as an experiment, my experiment. You owe me nothing. I don't take handouts." The words hit Evelyn harder than she expected. In her world, people fought tooth and nail for handouts. They schemed and manipulated and betrayed for far less than $50,000. Yet here was a man with nothing, a man sleeping on concrete with his child, refusing free money. "This isn't charity," she said, and she was surprised to hear a slight waver in her voice. "This is an opportunity. What you do with it is entirely up to you." She placed the card on the ground beside him. He did not pick it up. She did not expect him to. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the platform floor. Behind her, she heard the little girl's voice, small and curious. "Daddy, who was that lady?" And she heard the man's reply, soft and uncertain. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." Evelyn climbed the stairs back to street level, her mind racing. She would track the transactions. She would watch what he did with the money. And when he inevitably spent it on frivolous things, on selfish pleasures, on the same garbage that every human being craved when given the chance, she would have her proof. She would know, once and for all, that she had been right to close her heart all those years ago. Back in the subway station, Carlos Hill sat motionless, staring at the black card lying on the cold floor. His daughter, Lila, had fallen back asleep, her small fingers clutching the tattered book she always carried. It was the book her mother used to read to her, the pages worn soft from countless bedtime stories. Denise had held that book in her hands just 2 years ago, before the cancer took her, before the medical bills piled up like mountains, before Carlos lost his job and then his home, and then everything except Lila. He thought about throwing the card away. Every instinct told him this was a trap. Rich people did not simply hand out money to strangers. There was always a catch. There was always something they wanted in return. But then he looked at Lila. Her lips were slightly blue from the cold. Her shoes had holes in them. She had not eaten a proper meal in 3 days. Carlos picked up the card. It felt impossibly light for something that could change everything. $50,000. He could buy a car, get a hotel room, eat at a restaurant for the first time in years. He could live like a normal person, even if just for a day. But that was not who he was. That was not who Denise had loved. "All right," he whispered to himself, his jaw tightening with resolve. 24 hours. I'll use this card, but I'll do it my way. He did not know that somewhere across the city, a billionaire was already watching her phone, waiting for the first notification, waiting for him to prove her right. The first transaction came through at 9:47 in the morning. Evelyn was sitting in her office, pretending to review quarterly reports while her phone lay face up on the mahogany desk. When the notification buzzed, she grabbed it so quickly she nearly knocked over her coffee. "Kids' clothing store, $127.45. She leaned back in her chair, a thin smile crossing her lips. Clothing for the child. Predictable. Easy to justify. She imagined him walking into the store, eyes wide at the racks of new clothes, probably grabbing the most expensive items he could find. Anyone would do the same. But something nagged at her. $127 was not extravagant. It was barely enough for a winter coat and a few basics. If he wanted to splurge, he could have walked into any designer store and dropped thousands. She pushed the thought aside. The day was young. He would show his true colors soon enough. What Evelyn did not see was the scene unfolding across town, inside that modest clothing store. Carlos stood near the entrance, Lila's hand clasped tightly in his own. The fluorescent lights felt blinding after months of living in the dim corners of subway stations. The store smelled of new fabric and possibility, scents Carlos had almost forgotten existed. "Can I help you, sir?" The sales associate's voice was polite, but her eyes told a different story. They traveled over Carlos's worn sweater, his scuffed shoes, the stubble on his jaw. They lingered on his dark skin. They calculated and concluded, all within the span of a heartbeat. "I'm looking for some warm clothes for my daughter," Carlos said, keeping his voice steady. The associate's smile tightened. "Of course. The clearance section is in the back." Carlos felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in his chest, but he swallowed it down. He led Lila through the aisles, letting her touch the soft fabrics, watching her eyes light up at a purple coat with silver buttons. "Do you like this one, baby?" Lila nodded. "Don't worry about that. Today you can have what you need." When they brought their selections to the register, the associate examined the credit card Carlos handed over with barely concealed suspicion. She swiped it once, twice. Then she called for the manager, her voice carrying across the store. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification, and can you tell me where you obtained this card?" Carlos felt every eye in the store turn toward him. His jaw clenched. Lila pressed closer to his leg, sensing the tension. "The card was given to me," he said quietly. "It's not stolen." The manager arrived, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a skeptical frown. He looked at Carlos. "Sir, you understand we have to be careful. This is a premium card and I don't look like someone who should have one." Carlos finished the sentence flatly. "I understand. Call the bank if you need to. The card is legitimate." The manager hesitated, clearly weighing the potential scene against the potential loss. Finally, he nodded to the associate, who completed the transaction with obvious reluctance. As they walked out of the store, Lila tugged on Carlos's hand. Her voice was small but firm. "Daddy, we didn't do anything wrong." Carlos looked down at his daughter, at the fierce certainty in her young eyes, and he felt his heart crack and mend in the same moment. "No, sweetheart, we didn't." Back in her penthouse that evening, Evelyn stared at her phone as another notification appeared. "Bookstore, $43.20. Books. He was buying books. Evelyn frowned, trying to reconcile this with her expectations. Perhaps educational materials to resell, or maybe he thought books would make him look more respectable. The third notification came an hour later. Downtown Delhi, $89.75. Nearly $90 at a deli. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. There it was. He was treating himself to an expensive meal, probably steak, wine, dessert. The man had been living on scraps, and now he was indulging. This was what she had been waiting for. But the truth was something Evelyn could not have imagined. Carlos had not eaten a single bite of that food. Instead, he had carried bags of hot sandwiches, soup, and coffee back to the subway station where he and Lila had been living. He had found old Ray, the veteran who always shared his blanket on the coldest nights. He had found Martha, the elderly woman who had given Lila a granola bar last week when Carlos had nothing to offer. He had found Tommy, barely 18, runaway and scared, trying to survive his first winter on the streets. And he had found Eleanor, a 68-year-old woman whose hands shook from arthritis so severe she could barely hold a cup, yet who always managed to smile for Lila whenever they passed. Carlos handed out the food, watching their faces transform from suspicion to disbelief to gratitude. He did not stay to receive their thanks. He simply moved through the station, distributing warmth until the bags were empty. Lila walked beside him, carrying a small container of soup she insisted on delivering herself. "Why are we giving our food away, Daddy?" she asked, not with complaint, but with genuine curiosity. Carlos knelt down to meet her eyes. "Because they were kind to us when we had nothing, and because your mama used to say that kindness isn't really kindness until you share it with someone who can't pay you back." Lila nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. The fourth notification arrived just as Evelyn was pouring herself a glass of wine. City Community College, $450. She set the bottle down slowly. Community College? She pulled up the transaction details, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. The payment was for a 6-week electrical certification course, not for a child, for an adult. He was investing in job training. He was trying to build a future. Evelyn walked to her window, the same window where she had stood sleepless the night before. The city sprawled beneath her, glittering and indifferent. Somewhere down there, a homeless man with $50,000 at his disposal was spending money on job training and children's books and food for strangers. She pressed her palm against 15 years ago. A small apartment that smelled of coffee and ambition. Evelyn, younger and softer, sitting across from Daniel at their tiny kitchen table. "Do you know why I gave you everything?" she had asked him. Daniel had smiled, that devastating smile that made her believe anything was possible. "Because you love me?" "No." Evelyn had shaken her head. "Because I wanted to believe that when people have power, they use it for good. I wanted to prove that I was right to trust." Yet here was this stranger, this man with nothing, proving her wrong with every transaction. The next morning brought a notification that nearly stopped Evelyn's heart. Electronics store, $0.00. Transaction canceled. He had gone to an electronics store but bought nothing. Why? Unknown to Evelyn, Carlos had stood in that store for nearly 20 minutes. He had held a smartphone in his hands, feeling its weight, imagining how much easier life would be with a real phone. His current one was a battered flip phone, barely functional, incapable of the apps and internet access that modern job hunting required. The salesman had been eager, sensing a sale. Carlos had looked at the phone for a long time. His thumb had traced the smooth screen. It was practical, he told himself. It was necessary. It would help him find work, stay connected, build a better life. But then he had thought of Lila, sleeping in the subway, clutching her mother's old book. He had thought of the certification course he had just paid for, the investment in a future he could control. And he had thought of Denise, her voice soft in his memory, reminding him of what mattered. He had set the phone down and walked out. On the street, Lila had looked up at him with curious eyes. "Why didn't you buy it, Daddy? Your phone is broken." Carlos had squeezed her hand. "Because I don't need a new phone to live, sweetheart. But you need books to learn and warm clothes to stay healthy. The things I want can wait. The things you need can't." By afternoon, Evelyn was exhausted from watching and waiting. Her certainty had begun to crack, and each new transaction drove the fissures deeper. She was almost relieved when the next notification appeared, finally confirming what she had known all along. Luxury hotel and spa. I need to freeze a card immediately. There's been suspicious activity. The representative asked for details, and Evelyn provided them, her voice sharp with barely contained triumph. She was seconds away from confirming the freeze when another notification buzzed on her screen. She glanced down and saw the transaction details. Spa therapeutic massage. Booking for Eleanor Wilson. Evelyn's finger hovered over the confirmation button. Eleanor Wilson. The name meant nothing to her, but something made her hesitate. "Ma'am? Would you like to proceed with the freeze?" "Hold on," Evelyn said, her voice suddenly uncertain. She opened her laptop and searched for the name, cross-referencing it with the spa's location. Within minutes, she found a local news article from 2 years ago, a small human interest piece about homeless individuals in the city. Eleanor Wilson was a 68-year-old woman living on the streets. She suffered from severe arthritis that made every movement agony. She had been homeless for 3 years, ever since her pension had run out, and her family had stopped returning her calls. Carlos had not booked a spa day for himself. He had booked a medical massage for the elderly homeless. "Ma'am, are you still there?" "Cancel the freeze," Evelyn whispered. "The card is fine." She hung up and sat motionless in her chair. The laptop screen glowed before her, Eleanor Wilson's weathered face staring back from the news article. Evelyn thought of all the charity galas she had attended, all the checks she had written, all the causes she had supported from a comfortable distance. She had never once looked into the eyes of the people she claimed to help. The hours crawled by. Night fell over the city, and Evelyn found herself unable to eat, unable to work, unable to do anything except watch her phone. Only 2 hours. City General Hospital. $12,847.33. Nearly $13,000. At a hospital. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Was the child sick? Had something happened? Her phone buzzed again. It was an automated email from her bank, a detailed transaction confirmation she had set up years ago for any purchase over $10,000. The email included information automatically populated from the hospital's billing system. Payment for outstanding balance. Patient Denise Hill. Status: deceased. Relationship to payer: spouse. Carlos had used the money to pay off his dead wife's medical bills. Not for himself, not for luxury, not even in he had paid a debt to a ghost, a final act of love for a woman who could never thank him. Evelyn set the phone down carefully as if it might shatter. She walked to the window, the same window where this had all begun just 36 hours ago. The city lights blurred before her eyes, and she realized she was crying. She could not remember the last time she had cried. For 15 years, she had believed that people were fundamentally selfish, that given power and money, they would always choose themselves. She had built walls around her heart, walls so high and so thick that nothing could penetrate them. But this stranger who slept on concrete and wore threadbare clothes and had nothing except a little girl and a tattered book, had demolished those walls with nothing but simple, quiet goodness. She slid down against the window until she was sitting on the floor, her designer dress crumpling beneath her. Somewhere across the city, Carlos was probably sitting on a park bench with Lila, preparing to return to their homeless existence as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Evelyn did not know it yet, but she would not sleep that night either. She would sit by the window until dawn, watching the sky lighten, feeling something crack open inside her chest. It was not healing, not yet, but it was a beginning. That same night, while Evelyn sat broken by her window, Carlos and Lila were settling onto a park bench a few blocks from the subway station. The 24 hours had ended. The card in Carlos's pocket was now nothing more than a piece of plastic, its power extinguished. Lila leaned against her father's arm, the tattered book clutched to her chest as always. The stars were hidden behind a layer of clouds, but she stared up at the sky anyway. "Daddy, why didn't you buy a house?" Carlos looked down at her, surprised by the question. "Because $50,000 isn't enough for a house, baby girl." Lila considered this with the seriousness only a child can muster. Carlos was quiet for a long moment. He pulled Lila closer, feeling her small body warm against his side. "Your mama taught me something important," he finally said. "She used to say that money can't buy happiness, but it can buy opportunity. And when we have opportunity, we should share it, because someday we'll need someone to share with us." Lila nodded slowly. Then she tilted her head up toward the clouded sky and spoke with absolute certainty. "Daddy, I think Mommy is watching you from heaven right now, and I think she's smiling." Carlos's throat tightened. He pressed his lips to his daughter's hair and held her close, unable to speak. Above them, the clouds drifted apart just enough to reveal a single. The next morning, Evelyn sat in the back of her town car, parked across the street from the subway entrance. She had not slept. She had not changed out of yesterday's clothes. She had simply watched the dawn arrive and then ordered her driver to bring her here. Through the tinted window, she could see them. Carlos and Lila had returned to their corner against the concrete wall, the same spot where she had first discovered them. They were eating something from a paper bag, probably purchased with the last few dollars Carlos had in his pocket before the card was given. Life had resumed as if the past 24 hours had never happened. Evelyn's hands trembled in her lap. She had gotten what she came for. She had conducted her experiment and received results she never expected. The logical thing to do was drive away, file this experience in the back of her mind, and return to her carefully constructed life. But a question burned in her chest, refusing to be ignored. If she drove away now, how was she any different from Daniel? He had taken what he needed from her and disappeared without looking back. She had taken something from Carlos, too. Not money, but proof. Proof that goodness could exist without expectation of reward. Proof that her cynicism had been a shield, not a truth. If she left now, she would be using him just as Daniel had used her. Carlos noticed her approaching before she had crossed half the distance. He rose to his feet slowly, reaching into his pocket to retrieve the black card. Lila looked up from her book, her eyes curious but unafraid. "I was planning to find you," Carlos said as Evelyn stopped before him. "To return this." He held out the card. "Thank you for the last 24 hours. I don't know who you are, but I'm grateful." Evelyn looked at the card, then at Carlos, then at the little girl watching them both with those wise, ancient eyes. "I don't need your thanks," Evelyn said, and her voice wavered in a way it had not wavered in 15 years. "I need you to give me a chance." Carlos frowned, confusion crossing his weathered face. "A chance for what?" Evelyn struggled to find the words. Everything she had built, every wall she had constructed, every defense mechanism she had perfected, all of it was crumbling in the presence of this man who had shown her something she thought no longer existed. "A chance to believe again," she finally managed. "You did something I thought was impossible. I need to know that it was real, that you are real." She laid out her offer, speaking quickly as if the words might escape if she did not release them fast enough. Temporary housing for 6 months, enough time for Carlos to complete his electrical certification course and find stable employment. Job connections through her network, not charity, but legitimate referrals based on his own skills. Educational support for Lila, in exchange for Carlos volunteering part-time at a foundation Evelyn funded. "This isn't a handout," she emphasized. "This is an opportunity. What you do with it will be entirely your own achievement." Evelyn glanced at Lila, who had returned to reading her mother's book, her fingers tracing the worn pages with familiar affection. "Because I used to believe that helping people only led to being taken advantage of," Evelyn said quietly. "You just proved me wrong. And if I walk away after learning that I was wrong, then I become the very thing I despised." Lila looked up from her book. Her gaze settled on Evelyn's face with an intensity that seemed far beyond her 6 years. "Are you sad, lady?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She knelt down until she was eye level with the little girl, her expensive coat brushing against the dirt. Lila tilted her head, examining Evelyn with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "Because your eyes look like Daddy's eyes before Mommy died. Really, really sad, but like you forgot how to cry." Evelyn felt something break open inside her chest. She could not speak. She could only nod, a single small movement that acknowledged a truth she had hidden from everyone, including herself. Lila reached out and took Evelyn's hand in her tiny fingers. "It's okay," she said softly. "Daddy says crying is good. He says after you cry, everything feels lighter." For the second time in 2 days, Evelyn Carter wept. Six months later, Carlos Hill stood in the doorway of a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a modest building. It was not luxurious. The walls needed painting, the floors creaked, and the radiator made strange noises at night. But it was warm, it was safe, and it was his. He had completed his electrical certification course at the top of his class. He now worked full-time for a building maintenance company, earning an honest wage for honest work. The subway station where he had once slept was just a memory now, though he still visited sometimes to bring food to those who remained. Lila had started 1st grade at a public school 3 blocks away. She had friends, a lunchbox with her name on it, and a proper bed with clean sheets. Her mother's tattered book still sat on her nightstand, but it was now joined by a growing collection of new books, each one a small universe of possibility. When the knock came at the door that Saturday afternoon, Lila was the one who answered. She took one look at the woman standing in the hallway and threw her arms around Evelyn's waist. "You came!" Evelyn hugged the little girl back, something she would not have been capable of 6 months ago. "I told you I would!" Carlos appeared behind his daughter, a warm smile on his face. He invited Evelyn inside, gesturing to the small living room with obvious pride. As she sat on the second-hand couch, Carlos handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Evelyn lifted the flap and pulled out the contents. Inside was a hospital receipt, stamped paid in full. The balance for Denise Hill's cancer treatment, the debt that had haunted Carlos for 2 years, was finally settled. Beneath the receipt was a photograph. It showed Carlos and Lila standing in front of their new apartment building, Lila holding her mother's book, both of them smiling at the camera. In the corner of the photo, "You gave me the chance to pay that debt," Carlos said quietly. "But more importantly, you gave me the chance to show my daughter that good people still exist." Evelyn looked at the photograph, her vision blurring. "You showed me the same thing." She excused herself and stepped onto the small balcony that overlooked the street. The city spread out before her, the same city she had watched from her penthouse window for so many lonely years. But it looked different now, warmer somehow, more alive. 15 years ago, she had stopped believing in people. She had locked herself away in glass towers and boardrooms, convinced that trust only led to betrayal. But a homeless man with $50,000 and 24 hours had proven her wrong, not with grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but with simple, quiet choices that put others before himself. Evelyn Carter smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes, the kind she had almost forgotten how to make. And for the first time in 15 years, she did not feel alone. Behind her, she heard Lila's laughter and Carlos's voice reading aloud from a new book. The sounds of a family, the sounds of healing, the sounds of proof that some people, when given everything, choose to give it away.